Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at a mock test from Chilwell, and we're starting just outside the test centre. The building on the left is where the test centre is. The driveway just after that is where you'll go in and out for your test. Just remember, going in and out of there, of course, take your time. Our park itself is quite narrow, it's two-way, and some of the corners there are quite hard to see around, so don't rush through that car park, keep it nice and slow. As we come up to the traffic lights, we're going to be taking a left turn. There are two lanes as you make this turn, so the normal position is left-hand lane. If you need to turn right further ahead, then you can by all means go into that second lane as you make the turn. But if you're not sure, the left-hand lane is the best place to be until you know otherwise. When you are sat at the lights, make sure you're paying attention to everything around you. Keep an eye on the mirrors for anything coming up behind, such as push bikes, motorbikes, and keep scanning the sides as well for anything coming up the main road and the opposite side of the junction too, because when your lights go green, the oncoming cars will be going at the same time. Do not stare at the lights, of course, but do pay attention to them, because if you miss them because you're too busy looking at other things, that's another issue you've got to consider. So keep your eyes moving, scanning around, and just keeping engaged in what you're meant to be doing next. As we make our way down the main road here, you'll see the pupil will move over to the right hand side, ready to turn right onto Swiney Way. So when you're making this lane change, check your mirrors, signal in good time, and give people plenty of notice before you move over to that right hand lane. So the pupil is leaving it a little bit later than I'd like, but there's still plenty of time to get in that lane. And then of course we've got the filter lights taking us round to the right hand side. As you're coming up to the traffic lights, be mindful that if they're green, they're probably going to change. So you should approach with that in mind, not just rush through. If you get caught out by these and you end up braking quite heavily or trying to rush through as it's changing, that will put you at risk and is likely to cause you a fault on your test. So my advice is pick a point of no return, approach with your brakes covered just for a few seconds, ready for that point of no return. And if you reach that point with the lights still on green, then you can commit. If the lights change before you reach the point, your toes are already on the brakes, so that transition from going to slowing is going to be a lot smoother and a lot more controlled, and that's going to make it feel a lot better on your test. As we go, the green arrow permits you to go straight across the junction. The oncoming traffic should be stopped at red. Just be mindful that sometimes people make mistakes, or if there's anything coming through that's particularly notable, like a blue light vehicle or a push bike, e-bike or e-scooter, there's a higher risk of them not stopping at the red lights, so just keep them in mind when you are making your way across the junction. As you can see, this road is really quiet, and part of that is down to the time of day for this test. So if you notice, it is 7:55 on this one, and it's a Saturday morning, so really early, and as a result the roads are just really quiet. Now that might not be the case on your test, and if it's busier than this, of course you want to keep your wits about you, keep your eyes moving as much as you can. Equally, even when it's this quiet, you're going to have those people who will come up pretty quickly and want to get around you as quick as they can. So keep those mirrors covered regularly, keep looking around, and don't switch off just because the road looks empty. Up ahead, we're going to take a left into the car park for Tesco, and this is where I'm going to get the pupil to perform their manoeuvre. So if you're turning into a car park, the odds are you're going to do a bay park, either forwards or reverse. So these are something you want to practice before going for your test, of course. Make sure you feel confident with them and that you can do them without any advice and support from your instructor or parents if you're learning with them. You want to be completely independent with this maneuver, ensuring that you take your time, that you're looking around effectively, and that you finish with all four wheels inside the bay. If you don't finish with all four wheels inside the bay, you are allowed to pull out and correct it. So don't feel that you have to just accept the fault. And it doesn't have to be done in one correction either. You can take a couple of corrections as long as you're doing it in reasonable time and those corrections are improving the maneuver or the finish position. If you just leave it with the wheels over the line, you are going to get recorded as a serious fault. And that, of course, is a waste of a test if you know you can correct it and do better. As we make our way up to the exit for the car park, it is a one-way street. We're going left at the end on Swiney Way. So on these one-ways, just be mindful you don't have to worry about cars coming in. So if you're doing a right turn in particular, then you can get over to that right-hand side. Because we're going left, you can see the pupil tucks into the left-hand side, picks a gap and gets himself moving. Remember, effective observations are really essential when it comes to doing your test. You've got to make sure that when you pull out, you're choosing a safe gap to get yourself moving. If you pull out in a gap that's not safe, if there's cars approaching and you cause them a problem, then you're going to fail your test. And that has consistently been the most common reason for failing a driving test. Up at the traffic lights, we're going to be taking a right turn. So you can see the pupil lines up nice and early in that right-hand lane. Good mirror use and good signalling, joining the queue and then just waiting for those lights to change. On this set of lights, you'll notice on the far side there is a filter arrow. So when those lights change, you can make your way across the junction and the oncoming traffic, if there is any, should be on a red light. So same as I said before, just watch out for those more risky vehicles that may come through, such as e-bikes or scooters and push bikes. As you can see, the pupil makes his way across the junction, starts building his speed up nice and swiftly. We're still in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. However, up ahead, it is a really common error to pick up the speed thinking it's a 40 zone after the hill up ahead. This is also a common place for examiners to pull you up for your hill start. Now, I don't particularly like doing it because I don't feel the road's appropriate for it, but if an examiner asks you to pull over, then just go with it. Pick a safe spot, pull up, make sure you give the cars behind plenty of time to respond, and then move off into a safe gap as well, not forgetting your blind spot. Remember, you'll be asked to pull over and move off several times during your test. One should usually be a hill start, and one will be an angle start where you pull up behind a parked vehicle and then you're asked to move around it. So we'll see that later on this one. There's a red sign on the left there reminding you of the 30-mile-an-hour limit, because this section is the one I was on about a moment ago, where people often pick up the speed to 40 mile an hour instead, thinking all the greenery, that sort of change of environment gives them that mindset that it's a faster road. And that's exactly what my pupil's done here by just creeping up to about 35 for a few seconds. Notice the sign on the right here. We've got 3 lanes, the right turn for Toten. This is the start of the approach to Bardell's Island. So you can see the pupils lining up in lane 1. This is for Derby only, the first exit on the roundabout. And as we get close to the roundabout, you'll see another sign telling you first exit Derby A52. It's a little hidden in the hedges, but it is there. Then this lane splits into 2. Both those lanes turn left. I've recorded a signal fault for timing here with this pupil because there was a road on the left just before. He popped his signal on before he got to that road, way too early for the roundabout. Then he recognised that side road's there, cancelled it, and got a little closer to the roundabout before putting it on. Make sure you're not signalling too soon because it can mislead people. If someone was waiting to pull out of that junction, they might see the signal and pull out. On the A52, this section of road is a national speed limit road, so the examiners will want to see you pick up your speed. Notice the pupils accelerating through 50, and he's aiming to get up towards 60 miles an hour. Of course, the limit on this being a dual carriageway is 70. So ideally, I want to see pupils doing 60 plus, and I think an examiner would go down the same road of about 60 plus, being quite comfortable, particularly when the road is empty like this. Just past a sign on the left there saying Long Eaton and Sandyacre off to the left. You can pretty much guarantee you're going to use this exit if you come down the A52 this way. You're looking out for firstly that sign, which is your warning to move into the left-hand lane if you're not already there. So if you've been overtaking, when you get a little closer, you'll see the countdowns, 3 on the left there, 2, get your mirrors, get your signal, but don't slow down until you cross into the slip road. You notice my pupil's dropping his speed a little bit. It's not to the point it's causing a problem, but I don't want to see that happen. As we exit, we're then looking at signs for Sandyacre. That is to the right, so you can see the marking on the right there, SCRE. The sign on the left there telling you it's right. You can see the pupil moving position. If ever you need to change position, get on those mirrors, get that signal on, make sure nobody's nearby. And when you come down to the junction, take your time on the way in, look up for those markings. You can see SCRE and the markings there. And as you look for the next set of signs, you'll see SCRE on the middle lane. So we can follow those lines over to the middle position. If you leave it a little bit late like this, make sure you're covering your mirrors. Otherwise, you're going to get faulted for it. If you change direction without checking your mirrors, it will result in a fault. Coming around the curve there, you can see the pupil's a bit wobbly with his steering. This is partially because he's trying to come around too quickly on the junction. So I'm going to record a driver fault for that, for his approach speed through that bend. We don't want to be rushing around those bends, particularly when we know that under that bridge there is a traffic light. And on a busy day, if those lights are red, you are going to go straight into the back of a queue under that bridge. So very, very careful as you come around those curves. It will help with your steering, it'll help with your positioning, it'll help with your planning. Up ahead at the traffic lights, we're turning left. Notice the sign on the right there. You've got your left lane for left and straight and a second lane for right turns. So make sure you get in position nice and early. If you're turning left or right, make sure you signal before those lines open up, and that will help everyone know which lane you intend to go into. And then of course, when your lights change, little glance around, make sure you know what's going on, and in you go. Notice my pupil swung a little bit wide on that curve there. So I'm going to fault him there for steering. It was because he tried to accelerate a little too much out of the corner. So you've got to be very, very careful about how you pull away. Don't rush into those roads. Always look up at what you're going into. Make sure you got those front wheels pointed exactly where you want to go. Asking my pupil to pull up on the left up ahead, and I'm going to fault him again for his signals on this one. He pops his signal on and he just keeps on going for ages, it feels like, before finally pulling over on the left. So there's a signal timing fault. He has chosen a good place to pull up though, is clear of the driveways, and that's absolutely spot on. And the bike lane, because it's broken lines, you are allowed to pull over in it. When we move away again, what I'd be looking for and what an examiner's looking for is blind spot checks. Lean forward, look over your right shoulder, make sure you signal if there's anyone nearby, and pick a safe gap to pull out into. If you're not sure about the space, don't do it is the answer. There's no point rushing yourself out to try and get into a space that you're not confident with. You notice a little jump with the steering as we go down this road, and this is because the pupil is quite tense and the nerves can really affect how you grip the wheel. It didn't cause any real issue. It wasn't pronounced enough to record, in my opinion, as a fault, but it could cause a problem on your test if the examiner thinks you're jerking the wheel around without any need, and especially if there's vehicles nearby. Up ahead, we're going to take a left turn. This one is quite tight, so you want to come in really slow and steady, making sure you're putting your eyes into that turn before you enter. If you come in too quickly, it's going to make steering quite challenging, and that's exactly what this pupil does here. He's very late on the brakes and ends up having to wrestle with the steering wheel, bringing it in. So I'm going to record a fault for his approach speed there. We're into a 40-mile-an-hour road here, which, in all honesty, this road is not appropriate to do 40 down for a lot of it. The first part up to the bridge and a little further is okay, but then it quickly becomes quite narrow and you want to drop that speed. Doing another pull up on the left and then move away again. Pupil's picked quite a nice spot there. There is a driveway on the left, but he's got a little bit of space in front of him to make that safe, so I'm okay with that one. Then moving off, again, I want to see that blind spot check before moving out, and that moving out brings you into a safe gap, that you're not rushing out in front of people. Now, the pupil does get a little bit excited down this road, and as a result, he is going to pick up some serious faults, unfortunately, and that is really unfortunate because it is a 40 zone, and whilst normally would say try and get up to speed, the condition is if it's safe. So up ahead, if you notice the bend on the right here, how far my pupil is over the road, that is just not safe. You can't see what's coming the other way. It is going down as a serious fault for his normal positioning. So what I want to see here is that on those approach to those bends, you're keeping tucked right into that curb as good as you can. So you're creating more space for the oncoming cars. Additionally, reduce your speed if the sight is limited. I'm going to record a fault for his steering as well here, which is where he leans into the curb and ends up rubbing against it. Now at these speeds, that is quite dangerous. You can end up damaging your tires, knocking your track in, damaging your suspension, and all sorts. If you catch the curbs at speed, it is gonna be a serious or dangerous fault without question. So any roads like this, less space, less pace, and that's going to keep you nice and safe. Then if you're rushing down roads like this, you are bound to get faulted for it because it is just not appropriate for these roads. As we come down the road here, I'm going to get my pupil to pull up behind the car on the left, the red car there. So this is an angle start where the examiner will ask you to pull up about a car length behind a vehicle and then move off again safely around it. So what they want to see is a slow maneuver around that vehicle, looking over your blind spot and looking ahead for oncoming cars too. If you just sweep out into that oncoming traffic, you are going to put yourself at risk, and the oncoming vehicles if there are any. So nice and slow. The pupil does a really nice job there, bringing the car out quite gently before straightening up and picking up his pace, and that is exactly what I want to see. Remember, blind spot checks before you pull out, and I'd advise double check the blind spot as you start steering out as well on that one. We've got quite a few parked cars, of course. So you can see the pupil's really lowered his speed here. He's looking out for the left turn that we're taking. This is a really narrow road, so you can see how slow the pupil's approaching it, and that is absolutely fine. There's often vehicles parked on the left here, so if you come around too quickly, you're going to run out of room very quickly. Remember, less space, less pace is a really good way to think of any roads that you're coming down. These bends in particular are quite tight as well, so again, keep your eyes well ahead, try to keep tucked into the left and keep that speed nice and low. You can see the pupil keeping it under 15 as he's coming around those bends. Now this section here, my sat nav says turn left, but the markings are very clear that this road just bends round to the left, so I don't want to see anyone signalling for that. If you do signal, it's going to go down as an unnecessary signal fault, and that's exactly what I'm going to do for this pupil. Coming up to the end of the road, and we're going to take a right turn. This junction is very tight, so as we get closer you'll see those walls obstructing your view from either side. You've also got the cars on the opposite side of the road, meaning you cannot cross with other traffic as you come in here. It's very, very narrow, so we don't want to be pulling out on any traffic at all. The pupil is a bit wonky with how he pulls out on this one, but he corrects it very quickly, so I'm not going to record a fault for that on this occasion. Up at the end of the road then, we're going to take a left turn. And again, the view, if you can't see very well, just make sure you slow him right down, making effective observations. If you rush up to the end of the road and you don't check properly before pulling out, you are going to get faulted. Remember, that is the most common reason that people fail their driving test. So you'll see the pupil here brings the car right down to a pause before pulling out onto the road. He is a little bit wide when he goes out, but it doesn't cause any problems. It's not excessive, so I'm not going to record that on this occasion. Keeping in mind this is a 30-mile-an-hour zone, if you notice the speedometer on the bottom of the screen here, it does pick up to 31. Now that is the GPS, whereas in my car that read as 33. Because again it's creeping over that speed limit, I'm going to record it as a driver fault. If it's significant or it's prolonged, it will be recorded. If you correct it fairly quickly, it may not be recorded. So I'm going down the harsher side of this one by marking it, which I don't think is too unreasonable given that my car has a huge digital display right in front of you. There's no excuse for creeping over that speed limit because it is so in your face that you cannot miss the speedometer in my car. As we come up here, you notice the 40 sign on the left under the trees there, so we can pick up our speed a little. The pupil's picking up quite nicely to 40 mile an hour there. Notice the GPS in the bottom hit 38, so that was about 41 on mine. Notice the sign on the left as we come up as well, telling you to use the right hand lane to go straight ahead at the roundabout. If you do miss the sign, then the markings will remind you which lane to use. So you want to be looking out for those arrows on the road. And of course, as we approach, we give way to cars coming around from the right. As we enter the roundabout, it can be very easy to misposition the car. And you'll notice my pupil cuts the corner a small amount as he enters the junction. So I'm going to record that as a fault for lane discipline. It may seem a little bit harsh, but if anyone is nearby, that could result in them having to react, particularly if he leans over any further. Now, I think this was overcompensating because this pupil's common mistake is to look to the right too much and then not steer into the roundabout, so I have to pull the wheel for him. Another fault for use of speed here, notice the speedometer crept up to 32, so in my car that would say 34 or 35. And that's got to be recorded as a fault again. Now, if you keep making the same fault over and over again, it will be recorded as a serious habitual fault. It's not a case of, okay, you've made 4 or 5 speeding faults, but they're very minor. It's that it's consistently happening. It's going to go down as a serious fault because it's evident that you can't control the speed. So the pupil's now made 3 faults just for his speed control. If he makes another, the chances are it will go down as a serious fault depending on the circumstances. So I wouldn't want to see another speeding fault on this test. As we come towards Long Eaton, just keep in mind this road can get very, very busy, so you'll be expected to adapt your speed and your observations and your planning to the level of activity in the area. Because it's quite quiet, the pupil can maintain his speed quite well on this occasion, But if it's busy, we want to see a lowered speed and just more kind of head movements, more looking around to ensure that you know what's going on around you. Remember, when you look in your mirrors, looking with your eyes is one thing, but turning your head is going to open up that peripheral view and give you more awareness of what's going on. Just up ahead, we've got two roundabouts where we're going to be going straight ahead. The red sign on the left there says you can use both lanes to do that. However, the left lane's the ideal, and that's required for the second roundabout. Now, as the pupil changed lane, he put his left signal on, but what he didn't do was cancel it before entering the roundabout. So this creates a misleading signal as he goes across the roundabout. That unfortunately is going to be recorded as a serious fault because we've got vehicles behind us. At the second roundabout, the pupil decides to put his right signal on as he's coming into it. He doesn't need it, and it is an incorrect signal. He does cancel this when he recognizes that he doesn't need it. So it's going to go down as a driver fault because, again, that could cause issues if he left the signal on as he carried on across the roundabout. Just noting the solid line on the left there, this is a mandatory bike lane. Now, a mandatory bike lane where the lines are solid means you are not allowed to park in it. So if the examiners ask you to pull over, do not pull over where that solid line is. You notice a car up ahead that is parked in the bike lane. That is a parking offence and can end up with getting you a ticket. So make sure you don't obstruct any mandatory bike lanes. Now, earlier on we did pull up and there was a cycle lane, but the lines were broken, meaning it's not a mandatory bike lane. So it is okay to park there, but that solid line makes it different. You are not allowed to park where there's a solid line like this. As we approach the traffic lights, we're continuing straight ahead, and you'll notice that the right hand lane is what you need to go straight, the left hand lane being left only. If you do find yourself in that left hand lane, just take the left turn. It's far simpler than trying to correct yourself and ended up making a mess of it if you get it wrong. This is also going to make it less stressful than trying to rush across. And of course, we want as little stress as possible on your test. So don't create more stress than you need by trying to get in that lane when it's no longer reasonable. Just take that left turn. As we come to the next set of lights, the Sat Nav tells my pupil to keep right. As this isn't the correct instruction, an examiner should tell you ignore the Sat Nav and just carry on straight. Notice how we come around the bend and the pupil just gets really close to that left-hand curb. I'm going to put a driver fault there for how close he was. He literally just clipped it with the back wheel as he went by. Now, it was quite minor and the speed wasn't too excessive. I'm not worried about doing any harm to the car, so it's only going to be down to a driver fault on this one. Up ahead, we're going to be turning right back into the test center. So this is going to require a lane change. And of course, it comes down to using those mirrors, giving people plenty of time to react to your signals, and then gently bringing the car over. Ignore those arrows telling you to move back in because they are incorrect. And then of course, when you take up your position, you can get into that right hand lane for the right turn at traffic lights. Pupil does leave it a little later than I'd like. I want to see you moving over much earlier than this. And that would have had him over before the orange car caught up as well then. Because he's left it so late, again, this has increased that pressure, and we don't want that kind of pressure. We want to get on with things nice and early. As soon as we know we can move lane, get on with it. Don't delay it because you may run out of room, and then you're going to get very, very stressed out about that. As we turn right, that's going to bring us back into Eldon Road where the test centre is and bring this mock test to an end. I hope watching this has been helpful. If you have found it helpful, please like, share, subscribe and comment, and I'll keep these videos coming. Thanks again for watching, and God bless.